And so the place, the area that we really come to recognize and embody the fullness of what we are opening to is in the lived experience, in the fullness of the lived human experience. That possibly the most profound divine expression is the human that lives in freedom. And so the spiritual journey, the spiritual unfolding can be a hiding place where, in a lot of ways, we're actually trying to get away from the human lived experience. We're actually trying to get away from the parts of the lived experience that we don't enjoy, or the parts of ourself that we don't like, or the things that feel hard, the play of the world. And there can be a subtle and sneaky way of using the spiritual journey as a way to try to transcend and get away from the lived experience. Whereas the lived experience, the human experience, is actually the true divine playground. It's truly the stage where we get to be so fully present and illuminate and really come to embody what freedom is. That opening to the absolute, opening to the expanse is for sure a super important part of this unfolding. But it's so important to keep it real, to keep it real. And not imagine that some kind of spiritual ascension means that you don't have feelings, that you don't behave in certain ways, that life should be a certain way. Because the one that's creating all of those ideas is the one that's afraid to face themselves, right? And it's something that happens in spiritual communities, is that the students that don't want to have to face themselves project that upon the teacher or the guide. Like, the teacher should be like this, the guide should be like this. I expect you to behave like this, and project a conceptual idea of perfection, because the inner world, the inner turmoil of the human experience is trying to get away from the fullness of what has to be faced in order to know wholeness. And it doesn't only happen in spiritual communities, but many of us have spent many, many years being part of this unfolding with spiritual communities. And it's such an important piece, because the whole energetic of that actually stops the evolution of everyone in the community. Because if the students, the seeming students, are making projections, and the seeming teacher is not evolving because they don't want to show the reality and the fullness of the lived experience, then the evolution that can happen within a community is limited. If the teacher, if the guide is playing out a role, and if the students are in a frequency of expectation of what the guru should be, and it creates a dynamic where nobody is being real, and we can't be free if we're not real, right? It's so important to bring these things to the light and to see how we feed these dynamics within our own inner ideas and concepts, beliefs and expectations. In truth, a guide or a teacher or a way shower that's actually going to show you something is the one that is actually at their evolutionary edge and is so fearless about being real and allowing the fullness of a surrendered life to live through them, right? And that being will often have projections made upon them and ideas about what they are, what they're not. And of course, lived in freedom, that doesn't matter. But it's so interesting to see yourself in these dynamics. Not actually necessarily because they're playing out here, because they're not. Because this one is very, very keen and acute around keeping everything real and letting that evolution happen. But many of us have been part of communities and hold those frequencies and hold previous teachers in certain ideas and concepts and expectations and ideas of deception and being let down and disappointed. And actually what's happening is that in the internal environment, we're not fully willing to face ourselves. And so we're holding projections. This is what's in the field this morning. So we can be holding projections and ideas about how we were let down, how we were disappointed, the way that things played, and be in this whole idea that's totally projected. But a student that's living in projections about a seeming teacher, and we're just using these words because they get, we're familiar with them as a dynamic, is a student that's not willing to face themselves entirely. Any place, and actually let's say here that this is true with all dynamics. It's true with family dynamics, relational dynamics. It's true of the relational field. For some reason it's coming forward in this format because somehow it's in the field. And the greatest gift that I can give you is my realness. The greatest gift I can give you is my humanness lived and the truth of what it is to live this glorious, glorious unfolding in all of its dimensions of unfolding, right? Because then you're going to live that. You're going to live and work at a multidimensional level. And we dissolve hierarchies, we dissolve roles, we dissolve relational dynamics that are held in expectation and conditioning. And we join, we meet in the light, we meet in reality, where we realize that there are no hierarchical dynamics in reality, and that we join here as a field. And as a field, every being is equally here and present, and every voice is equally relevant, right? And it's so potent to realize that if we can truly allow the dynamic of reality to unfold, if we're courageous enough to let the dynamic of reality unfold, that we're inviting the possibility of opening to a deeper freedom, that the mind in its beliefs and conditionings about what spiritual community is, what Sangha is, can actually evolve with consciousness and not be stuck in prior ideas of hierarchies where nobody is truly fully free, right? That if we really want to explore what freedom is, that we have to be willing to break orbit and blow open the boundaries and edges of our conceptual ideas of what enlightenment is, what awakening is, and what it is to live this freedom, right? Because one of the greatest parts of this unfolding is where we open deeply enough within ourselves to have a profound compassion for our own humanness. And when we have a profound compassion for our own humanness, that becomes a reverberant field of compassion for humanity, which is the dynamic frequency field of a unified consciousness seeking unity within itself. Love loves itself. A unified field is completely compassionate and open to itself and is flowing dynamically within itself to know itself in order to remember itself as the knower. Because where everything dissolves in the play of consciousness and discordance is where we open to Brahman as the knower. And what does Brahman know? Brahman knows only itself. Brahman knows Brahman. And where God knows God, where love knows only love, there's a freedom from the whole dance of consciousness, from the play of cause and effect and the obscurations of karma. And ultimately, we can only truly be free when we're free of the play of karma, where we really unhook the deeply held beliefs. So we're going to be tying all of these threads together. There's lots of glorious threads alive and awake in the field. And so a really important part of this that's presenting itself right now is how we learned in the young life to take on a responsibility within the needs met structure. We learned to take on a responsibility for ourselves. We learned to take on a responsibility within the tribal consciousness of the family dynamics. It doesn't actually matter the particulars, but the particulars of our family dynamics will affect the particulars and the subtleties of how we have taken on a responsibility. But in this moment, let's speak about it in a broad sense. We take on a responsibility for ourselves, and we also often take on a responsibility to make an allegiance with the mother, an allegiance with the father, an allegiance to playing a particular role within the family dynamic that allows us to get our needs met. And that sense of responsibility, like I have to look out for me, because really, nobody's really truly fully looking out for me, right? Even though we're also moving to get our needs met, and so we are getting our needs met, we are being looked out for in the best possible ways that our family and caretakers can. But there's a deep sense within us that there's something happening within that dynamic. We're picking up, we're so vibrantly fresh. We're picking up what's not unified. We're picking up the discordant patternings in the field. And we're reorganizing as a consciousness, we're reorganizing and mapping ourselves to the field that we're in order to get our needs met, in order to find how we fit. And at the same time, we're taking on a kind of responsibility for ourselves, which ultimately, until we return to God, until we return to our absolute knowing of what we belong to, we're holding this sense of responsibility, which plays in the life as a kind of independence and self-reliance, where we don't really trust life. And we're kind of held prisoner within this idea of, I have to be looking out for me, Am I safe? How do I move here? Right? So we learn it so young. It's so instinctual. So then we go through life and we're reading life according to this deeply protective mechanism and this belief in division and limitation and mapped to a field that's discordance. This is where I belong. This is where I fit in. And if I stay here, then I'm safe, right? Of course, it's not the truth. But it becomes an unconscious patterning. It becomes an unconscious way of being. And so we then are creating from this frequency of lack, of deficiency, of having mapped ourselves here, we're creating from it. And it also means that we then recognize it in the field. Like, oh, there's a dynamic for me to go towards because that's where I fit. It feels familiar. I fit there because I'm not seen. I fit there because there's a sort of underlying misery, an underlying sort of tension. And I fit there because it's familiar. I go towards this relationship because this being is emotionally unavailable, and that's familiar because my father was emotionally unavailable and I feel comfortable here, right? So we're unconsciously mapping ourselves and creating from this deeply held discordant frequency dynamic, which is division, separation, or the belief in. It's not, we're never actually divided, but the belief in, right? And so then we create all of our relationships and we create our attraction to spiritual communities, right? We create our attraction to partners, to job situations, all kinds of communities, not even spiritual communities, whatever interests and career paths and hobbies, whatever we get interested in, we're mapping ourselves and our partnerships. And then we start, of course, mapping those dynamics within the families that we create if we're parents. And on it goes, and on it goes, and on it goes. Tra-la-la, right? And yet there's something in the heart that's longing to live this truth. And so we have this simultaneous unfolding of when the seeker comes alive. The seeker comes alive because we actually have some kind of opening, awakening, and remembrance. The seeker actually comes online, born out of a seed of awakening, a seed of recognition that there's something greater. And as we open to that, instead of recognizing the openness as the frequency of our own glorious knowing of true nature, we're habituated to project that seed of awakening externally. We can feel like there's something, and then we start seeking for it in the world of our creation. We start seeking out there for what that is. And then we're creating from the discordant frequencies, actually completely perfectly, we're creating the relationships, the guidance, the communities. We're creating everything perfectly. We're creating it because it's mapping a reflection to us of the discordance that we're holding. But we don't see that until we see it. Until we see it. Until we see that everything that's unfolded in our life, in all of the relational dynamics, is a map of our inner discordance. Wow, right? And in a way, what's being shared here now is so revelatory and so profoundly beautiful. But it's almost as if we have to have a readiness to hear this, because we would so profoundly reject it if we don't have the readiness to look and to see. If we're in the belief that what I'm living is reality, and the way of making projections and projecting our unconscious shame and guilt and deep belief in separation, if we don't realize that that's how the mechanics of life is generally working through most humans, then we believe our stories are real, and we keep telling our stories, and we keep perpetuating our stories, and we gather tribally, collectively around our stories and around our hardship and our dramas, around what's wrong. And we're missing the whole point that we're creating it. And most importantly, that we have the power to change it. But we don't have the power to change it within the frequency field of cause and effect. We don't have the power to change it within the mental structures and constructs, because that is a frequency field of limitation, of fear. But we do have the power to change it by opening to true nature and being the light that illuminates, and having the courageous willingness to receive creation back into the creator field and take absolute full responsibility for our creation. Recognize that the flow of consciousness as the flow of life is a flow of evolutionary consciousness. It's the flow of evolutionary consciousness that humanity is. That humanity is not a static thing. Humanity is not the arrival. Humanity is not something to rest in. Humanity is the evolutionary process. It's a dynamic flow, right? And it's on its way through this evolutionary process to remember its divinity. And humanity is deeply imprinted with discordance, but deeper than the discordance, at a cellular, molecular level, we are imprinted with the blueprint of Christ consciousness. We hold the frequency codes of Christ consciousness. And as we open to the pure consciousness, we're opening to Christ consciousness, and we're opening to remember and bring online the fullness of the light of consciousness, and we're bringing forward the dormant, deep codes of purity and innocence that we haven't been living from, so that we can live from a fuller and more precise and refined frequency of consciousness, to refine deeper than we've ever opened, and so that we become the resonant remembrance of a field of Christ consciousness, of pure consciousness, that has the capacity to know itself in and as everything, and collapse the field of effect into the causal purity of being the glory of God, knowing itself, and the principle of light, which is reality, right? Alleluia. This is what we're here for. This is what a human life is all about, right? We're not here to be trapped in ideas of the mind. We're not here to be trapped in pomp and adornment. We're not here to even to be trapped in ritual and puja. We're not here to be trapped in ideas of something that is outside of us. We're here to be free, right? We're here to recognize that as we gather, the true gathering that the glory is inviting us into is a gathering of the ones that are recognizing the consciousness of the Christ of purity of God in the heart, the ones that are recognizing the light and being called to gather in that light, being called to gather in the frequency of truth, of love, and truly courageously willing to change, to let change happen, and to be the change happening, right? To be the change happening is to be an evolutionary process. And so we don't need to get stuck in any stories of the surface of life dynamics. We see it. We use the macro to affect the micro, to refine the micro so that the micro is an absolute superpower that then changes the macro on the surface, right? We are so powerful. We are so powerful in our true nature. But we have to see beyond the limitations of what we are creating out of our belief in separation and discordance. We have to be willing to break orbit from what doesn't serve us anymore. We have to be willing to let the edges of the sense of my life blow open, right? In every way. That's what it is to break orbit. We have to be willing to let the cork pop out of the top of the bottle so that the effervescent bubbles and all of the magic can actually escape its confines and live the fullness of this reality. Be the change, be the field, be the frequency field that is inviting all of humanity to join, to be one in this field, right? It's not about tribes meeting behind closed doors and having structures of elitism and all these different kind of ideas that divide. It's about opening up the whole field of what we are to the true technology of love and all inclusivity, and gathering in this frequency field where everyone is welcome and where every being that is called by the light in the heart and the frequency of the Christ consciousness, the pure consciousness in the heart, every being that is called by no matter what name that we are being called, whatever name is calling us, right? Whatever names of the divine are calling us, that we come together in the mystical revelation where there is no division. There's no, this is how we do it. This is the way it is. This is the best way. This is the right way. We belong, you don't, right? It's about an all-inclusivity and truly living the frequency field of the technology of love. So where we are holding these ideas of what we are responsible for, what we are in allegiance with, why we have to keep ourselves small, why I wouldn't break orbit, why I don't really want things to change, why I would rather sit around with a cup of tea and talk about all the things that are challenging, tell you my stories of my life and what has been hard, and collaborate with your stories, while I would rather sit around and join and meet in this frequency field of fear and kind of pretend that I want to know God, pretend that I really want to know this truth. But am I actually willing to be so real as it takes to truly know the glory of God? That is the question we must ponder in the heart of our longing. Are we truly willing to make the moves that it takes to truly truly take responsibility for ourselves, not as a separate one that's in a protective idea of self-sufficiency and being responsible for myself, right? But actually opening to a field of self-sustainability, a field of one that sustains itself within the frequency of love, of caring, sharing, loving, giving, being, right? Are we willing to actually live this truth and be the change? Are we willing to let go of all of the things that are keeping us comfortable and all of the ways that we constantly collaborate with division and separation, and how we would rather tell our stories and make projections than actually free ourselves, right? It's powerful. It's very powerful to face yourself. So as these words come, if you feel stirred and know how glorious it is that something can stir you out of the comfort of where it's like where the me wants to rest. My spiritual journey, the things that I enjoy, what is comfortable. This is how we do it. To recognize the sneaky ways that tribal consciousness is holding us bound and divided, right? That it's only when we come to this willingness to break free from tribal consciousness with our families, our communities, with all of the ways that we're keeping division in place. Are we willing to free ourselves from the dynamics that divide, from the dynamics of fear? Are we really willing to be taken by love into the fullness of love? Are we really willing to be taken by God into the glory and live this glory right on the surface of life? Are we willing to let the rubber hit the road? Are we willing to put our money where our mouth is, right? Are we willing to say yes to divine guidance and the flow of life, right? And move outside of our comfort zones? Are we willing to be lived? Are we willing to face what we're being asked to face in order to shift those dynamics? Are we willing to be real? Are we willing to live this reality as a divine human, right? Are we willing to let the human lived experience be an expression of the divine on the surface of life, right? What are we longing for? When we enter the longing, we're entering the realm of heart. We're entering the power of the fullness of the heart that actually can lead us into the glory of what the heart knows, into the glory of what we've always known to be the truth. And in a way, the simple truth is the I am presence of being. The I am presence of being. That I am is the pure consciousness, the Christ consciousness. And here in the I am presence, there's an openness and a glory. There's a current, a flow that's carrying itself as a unified field into the knowing of itself and to be carried as this unified field. It's this openness and willingness to face everything, to receive life, and to know that life is a reflection. If we receive the reflection and we stop projecting and we stop telling the stories and we stop having expectations of anyone that we aren't willing to live fully within our own heart. We stop having expectations of anyone that we're not willing to fully live in our own heart. We stop projecting and we recognize that the projections that we're making are an avoidance strategy. And we can use the seeing of this as a powerful opportunity to meet ourselves more deeply and to open to the ways that we're holding these dynamics innocently, where we've made commitments to the tribal consciousness of our families, of our mothers and fathers and our caretakers, and we're still holding these dynamics, where we've taken responsibility to stay in accord, in allegiance with. As we open to see, we start to free the tendrils of fear and doubt, division, lack, scarcity. We start freeing ourselves, and it's such an empowering, dynamic unfolding to free ourselves through illumination, to not be relying upon mental processing and understanding and trying to make sense of everything. That we release that whole idea of processing through the mental and psychological, and we open to processing more through the somatic, and then we open even more deeply to recognizing that the true shifting happens as a field of illumination. That we're not actually fixing and changing and coming to realize through insight and story. We're actually shifting to see that what we have believed about ourselves has never been true. We're actually opening to realize, well, the whole story that I've had as a foundational idea of myself has never, ever been true. We could say on that level, I've believed myself to be a person that's divided from God. I've believed the lack, the separation, the division. I've believed all of that. And the truth is that I'm actually not that. What I am is this wide open field that is infinite, unbounded. I'm not a thing. And it's like a dance in the heart field as we collapse the mental constructs and protective mechanisms and conditionings into the heart field opens. And simultaneously, as we open to the presence of being and the wide open reality, the absolute field of infinite eternal being, we're opening to the pure mind, the pure awareness, the awake field. We're opening to Shiva and we're opening to Shakti, right? We're opening to the Shiva and we're opening to the Shakti. And as we open to the Shiva and we open to the Shakti, the heart starts to rebalance itself because it's wired to remember union. It's absolutely wired to remember union. And as the heart is remembering union, what is actually happening in the field of consciousness is that the consciousness itself is dancing within itself. It's creating appearances to be reflected, to be received, transmuted, It's surfacing discordance. It's illuminating, right? And it's bringing everything home, everything home, everything home. It's bringing home all of the ideas that we've had of who we are and all of the beliefs that we've had about what this life is and how to live this life, all the conditionings that hold us in protection and division and scarcity and lack, deficiency. It's bringing home all of these patterns and recalibrating and reorganizing to the original divine pattern. And in that, revealing the source codes, revealing the light codes, the blueprint of the Christ, the blueprint that actually Yeshua told us about many, many, many years ago, but religion has distorted, interpreted, let's say, distorted through interpretation. We're opening to the true, non-dual, mystical revelation, which is that in oneness with God, there's one glory, and we are one in that living glory, right? And so as we refine as a field that is remembering union, we're unifying our lived experience, and there's more of a sense of love and openness and belonging and gorgeousness and flow and synchronicity and magic and blessing. It's all here. It's delicious and groovy and really feels so aligned, right? And as this is happening, it's like culminating itself for the glory of the Christ in us, to remember the glory of God, the light, for Brahman to know Brahman, for God to know God, and to dissolve into the one on such a fine frequency level where there's the knowing there's only one, one with no second. The principle is one, right? It's not ever something that the mind could comment on. Oh, I'm not there yet. I don't know that. Of course not. The mind will never know, but the consciousness will continue to refine itself, deepen and purify itself, balance itself out in the heart, and bring the remembrance of union. The Shiva Shakti in perfect union is the sense of the glory of the light, the perfect balance. The glory is one. The heart is one. Truth is one. And everything that we're living in our lives are tributaries of this truth. There's nothing that's out of place. It's the mind that makes it out of place and says, this is wrong. These are the things in my life that I like and are working. These are the things that I don't like and are not working. And so we try to transcend and focus upon the things that I like and that are working and get away from the things. Or we try to fix and change the things that are difficult and not working. But the fullness of the lived human experience and being real is about focusing upon what feels challenging and is not working, not by trying to fix and change it, but by receiving the frequencies of the discordance and allowing the discordance to surface, to be felt as a somatic field, received and transmuted in the presence of the light that illuminates, right? The presence of the light that illuminates, the awareness that sees, is absolutely essential for the full cycling to happen. Because if these discordant patterns don't have a higher consciousness, finer frequency to collapse into, they'll just recycle again, right? We'll come to some sort of sense of feeling like we've transmuted, but the consciousness, the intelligence will recycle it again until it completely collapses. Because what has to collapse is the whole belief system in cause and effect. The whole belief system that I'm doing this and it's having this effect. Because that's the belief in fixing. I'm doing this practice, this technique, I'm taking this whatever, this supplement, and it's having this effect. It's making me better. It's making me a better person, right? Yes, it is in the moment and it feels good. But ultimately, making me better is going to come around again as another layer of disappointment until it's seen in the light and it's transmuted at a frequency that can actually call it home, shift it. And that shifting isn't a fixing, changing. It's not a band-aid. It's not a fix-up job. It's a revealing. What is it revealing? You're not what you think you are. You are love. It's revealing the true nature, that what you are is not the story. What you are is not broken, deficient, separate, lacking. What you are is love itself. What you are is already whole. What you are is beautiful, safe, coherent, grace. What you are is a blessing field, right? So the healing is a revealment of what is true. And that illumination reveals what was untrue. But it doesn't make what was untrue wrong and amplify the shame and guilt which happens in the field of cause and effect. It just dissolves and collapses the patterning so that the patterning of reality starts to be what's taking up residence and starting to be embodied. And so why this is all so important is to be a living emanation of this, to embody this, we have to keep taking it all the way through, digesting the toxins through our nervous system, digesting it, actually taking it in instead of projecting it and making someone else responsible and someone else wrong. Stop trying to analyze other beings, characters and personas and their behaviors and having all these ideas of how you should be and how you shouldn't be and what it would look like if you were. It's to see that all of that is a deep projection and an unwillingness to fully digest your own belief in some kind of darkness, right? And to actually face your own belief in darkness and division, and to be the principle that can illuminate and dissolve and collapse the belief in separation, the split, the sense of two, of duality, that dissolves the duality at a multidimensional level so that the lived experience is an embodiment of the one, of the non-dual, of the one light, right? And it's about opening to the glory of the light and then bringing that light right into the body, embodying the light, letting the light come to your lived experience so that your human experience as a light body, as light, is an expression of the divine frequency, is an emanation of love right on the surface of life. And then your lived experience doesn't have to particularly speak anything because the frequency of your lived experience is your living offering, is the living transmission, is everything that you are. You don't need for anyone to see you or to understand you or to know you because you know what you are. You know as a frequency of knowing, which is the frequency of Brahman knowing Brahman, God knowing God, where there's only one knower. And what that knower knows is pure knowledge. And pure knowledge is freedom, is everything, right? So you can take this sharing into any tradition, any wisdom teaching, and you'll find the same wisdom is there. Doesn't matter the flavor, the same essence of the wisdom is the same in every tradition. And when we strip it back from all of its ways and flavors of dancing, we find a truth that is so simple, and a truth that the heart knows, and a truth that is already here in the heart, and that we can embody, and that the lived experience of a human life is the way that we embody it. So we don't want to transcend away from the lived experience, because this is how we fully embody the light. This is how we become an emissary. This is how we actually gather as a field of light, right? It's glorious. It's beautiful. It's a celebration. Alleluia, right? It doesn't matter what traditions or teachings make our hearts sing. It's about distilling the essence of what brings us alive and recognizing that what brings us alive is our own true nature. It's not about that out there. It's about this in here is the revelation, right? To be the living revelation and open to this revelatory field where we're open to deepening and living at the evolutionary edge and being real and sharing the lived experience in all of its multidimensional colorfulness, and never arriving in a sense of being someone that has got something, but being a living, evolutionary, intelligent process in constant revelation, celebration, in constant loving flow of abundance, giving to itself abundantly, giving to itself, nourishing itself as a field of bliss nectar, right? We never go hungry, we never go thirsty, we're never alone here, right? No matter where we are, no matter what is happening, we're held here. Guidance is always here. Love is always here. And here, in our humility and surrender, the natural flow of surrender, the flow of devotion, pure surrender, pure devotion, the natural flow of life living itself, we open to more and more refined frequencies, and we digest more of the threads, and we illuminate more of the field. And it's like being a living, reverberant field that is in service to the whole, right? We travel as a caravan. The whole of humanity is traveling as a caravan, right? But as we travel as one, let's know the one. Let's not be focused upon the delusion of the mind. Let's not be focused upon what we're creating from delusion. Let's see the delusion of our creation and bring it back. Let the macro affect the micro. Bring it back. Bring it back. Right? And let us celebrate and gather in the true sense, where we join, because the light is known in the heart and we're being called by the glory to come forward and share as a field our revelation. We're being called to come forward and share the revelation, not divide ourselves in these ways of, am I being seen, like creating myself and my offering with ownership, but that we're realizing that it's one offering and the frequency is the offering. As soon as we divide in my thing, my offering, or we're threatened by seeming others, right? We're in the divisive separation. We're in this idea of my gifts, what I've got. But what if we share what God has put in our hearts to share and realize that it's one field of sharing, one field of revelation. And the more that we join in this, the more powerful and potent the frequency is, right? It doesn't belong to anyone. How could it if there is only one, right? One field, one glory, one light, one revelation.